Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to call this meeting of the Halton Police Board to order for Thursday, the 27th, I'm advancing it by day, of October. Members of the board, good morning, and members of staff, good morning. Thank you for being here today. Are there any regrets, Mr. Secretary? Councilor Farmar's regrets. Councilor Farmar's regrets. Members of the board, do you have any disclosures of pecuniary interest to report this morning? I'm not seeing any. Mr. Secretary, is Mr. Foster with us this morning?
Mr. Foster is online. He just doesn't appear to have turned his camera on.
I just wanted to know if he was here or not. Okay. This morning, that's right, Bill Trustee's a little slow for me. We have before us our minutes of the meeting of September 29th. They have been circulated. Are there any comments, questions, errors, or omissions to report today? Let's see any. Can I get a motion to approve those minutes? Thank you, Ingrid, and seconded by anybody?
Here.
Oh, Kurt, were you here?
I wasn't here for the public agenda.
Oh, that's right. You came later on, so I know. Clark, were you here for last month? You weren't here for last month's meeting either. Huh.
Don, what?
The minutes are a record of the meeting. It doesn't require having been here or not. You're still a board member in good standing. You can move and second.
Thank you, Kurt. Appreciate it.
Oh, there he is.
Oh, there's Don. Good morning, Don. All in favor of the approval of the minutes? That's carried. Thank you. We do not have any presentations or delegations on our public agenda. We do not have any consent agenda items. We have a number of discussion items, and we'll start out with the quarterly human resources summary. Does the executive team have any comments on that, or just take questions?
No, not unless there's questions.
Okay, so Ingrid.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have one question as it relates to the total civilian vacancies. We know that every industry and every organization is finding its challenges in terms of recruiting. And I assume that the number of 35 is larger than what we normally have in that particular category. So I just wonder if we could elaborate on the 35.
Yeah, no, certainly through the chair. We've been carrying some vacancies on the civilian side in different positions. In some cases, there are positions that are being reallocated for more prioritized new positions within the organization. There are some recruiting initiatives which have taken longer than we wanted them to take. For example, for a human resource manager to work with Tracy and a second person in the return to work WSIB sort of specialized area. They've taken quite a while to fill. And we also want to look at where there are other vacancies where we might not need the potential to reallocate those to other more prioritized positions. So for example, we had some discussions a week or so ago about how many more frontline dispatchers, communicators, 911 professionals do we need to add. Obvious budget implications, we may be able to allocate some of those vacancies to that prioritization. But I think that in itself, the communications area, which is so important and critical to our frontline staff, I believe this report shows it as being 6 under, and it might not be that much under now because this is a snapshot of a month or so ago, and we're hiring on an ongoing basis. So these are a snapshot in time, which can be either up or down, month to month. It also contributes significantly to any surplus that we have at the end of each year. Normally, we have a relatively healthy surplus, which helps us to fund some of our capital. So there's a negative on one side of not being able to hire quick enough or to have all the positions filled. There's also a positive when it comes to the surplus and how we have to in Halton fund our capital programs in many instances through our operating budget.
Mr. Chair, 23 of the 35 positions are in the process of being filled. 23 of the positions are in the process of being filled.
So it isn't a matter of a higher turnover, it's a matter of trying to fill the critical vacancies as they arise, because I see the majority are under supervisory, professional, and senior clerical. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? Kath?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question around promotions. Is there any way we can determine what kind of promotions internally on a quarterly basis we can see?
Promotion?
Within
Not sure what do you mean?
Within the service.
Like when there are promotions? Well, most promotions within the service tend to be on the sworn side, constables becoming sergeants, sergeants becoming staff sergeants. We do try to bring those people before the board in a fairly timely fashion after their promotion. We run a sergeant and a staff sergeant process not every year, but we're due to run both of those. And then we have a list of eligible people to be promoted. So we have to do those lists. Right now we're carrying, for example, 2 vacancies at the staff sergeant rank, which would normally be the executive officers for the 2 deputies. But the deputies both chose to put those people out on the front line and run short where we are on a priority basis as well. So we will run those processes at the staff sergeants.
So we're just doing the planning for the staff sergeant right now. Traditionally, we will bring all the members to the board to introduce them. You most recently saw us do it with Inspector Laframboise and Sue Biggs. We got away from it from COVID because of obviously it just became too much to do it on Zoom. But it would be our plan to bring that back so that you can meet the people, hear the bios, and do that. So you can see that in the future.
I'm not really. I'm concerned about just seeing what level of promotions are happening within the service on a regular basis, where we are promoting and then to recognize those individuals. So it's one thing to bring them to the board, but I think having a report would be nice.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And we may be able to, before the end of this meeting or shortly after, be able to tell you there was 1 superintendent, 2 inspectors promoted this year, how many staff sergeants and how many sergeants, but we would have that. So.
As part of this report, that is what goes into building this quarterly report. So the actual report that we get is much, much bigger. And it's just basically quantitative. It shows the transition. It won't show the bios or that type of thing. That's what you get.
I mean, we're seeing numbers, and but I'd like to see what's happening within the service. Thank you.
Anything further? Kurt?
I'm just wondering, Mr. Chair, if in that larger report there might be a way to just pull that out. And I don't want to make work because I know you've got a lot of work, but just to summarize the promotions during the period. If it already exists in the larger report, Deputy Halton, and I don't know if it does or not.
We'll have a look at that. But maybe just as a point of understanding, most of our promotions within the police service, uniform or civilian, unless there's a new supervisory position created, are because of attrition. So if we had a superintendent retire, or when Superintendent Davis went to become the chief of Sarnia, we promoted, Sue Biggs became a superintendent, Anita or Raph became an inspector. There'd be a staff sergeant promoted and a sergeant promoted. So one retirement or one departure from the organization can mean 4 or 5 promotions. That's why we don't put too many chiefs on the same airplane. There are a lot of promotions. Mostly are through attrition and retirement, and we try to gauge how many people are going to retire at different ranks and how many positions we will need when we run the promotional processes, so we don't have a list that's far too unmanageable.
Thank you.
Any further? Can I get a motion to, thank you, Kurt, seconded by Nav, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Seeds fund statement, pretty self-explanatory. Does anybody have any questions about that? Ingrid.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just noticed that what we had in August of 2021 was, in terms of deposits, in most recent 6 months, and checks issued in most recent 6 months was about 197,000. But this year, at the same time, it's over 1,078,26, which is a huge jump. And I wonder if you could please elaborate why it's so huge. There may be a correlation to the crime statistics that have been submitted as the next item.
I mean, Greg may have a different, more technical answer, but of course, we seize a lot of property and funds through our investigations. And depending on any individual investigation, there could be a large sum of cash, there could be assets, even up to including vehicles and houses and different types of things. Drugs are a little different. We just saw Appeal just seized $25 million worth of drugs. That doesn't go into this sort of thing. Unfortunately, it's not like Miami Vice. We don't get to keep that money. So it's money in, the money goes back out through levels of government, and then some of it trickles back to us in the form of grants, particularly in the province of Ontario. Some grants come back for the Criminal Intelligence Service of Ontario to fund organized crime types of projects. So there are some ways that some of that money trickles back, but it's no way mirrors the amount that individual police services sees. And you could, I mean, there's an argument to be made for asset forfeiture, increased asset forfeiture investigators to seize additional funds. And then that again becomes a budget issue as well. So Greg, on the specifics?
There's no specific one-time thing that's new or different for this year. It's more just timing and potentially just things being a little slower over the last few years, obviously with COVID and some catch-up of flowing some money through, as the chief said.
I think, if I may, Mr. Chair, I think it's fair to say that seized funds are only disposed of upon order of the court, for the most part, correct? So I think what that means is that there was that large sum seized at one point, and it has been disposed of through the court. The court has ordered what would happen with it.
Have we seen such a large amount before?
I believe we've been up and down over the years for sure. I mean, it's when it comes to the checks going out, I sign those. Some are checks back to the individuals because the court's ordered the money back to them. Whether I agree with that or not doesn't matter. It's painful signing some of those checks for large sums of money, which you know are from proceeds of crime. Sometimes they're going back to pay legal fees for the defendant. So you could have $500,000 because you're a drug trafficker, and someone awards $100,000 back to your defense lawyer. So they really do profit from crime.
Further questions?
Thank you very much.
So I just have, so other than the province and potentially lawyers and defendants that might be found not guilty, wherever the case might be, where else would those funds go? Are there other beneficiaries of those funds?
Some of it's federal.
Most of it's going back to, going right back to the people.
Most of it goes back to the people, or it's forfeited to the government.
And the government in this case would be the provincial government?
Some of it goes back federally, and some provincial.
And is that dictated by individual statutes upon which the crime was committed under, or Narcotics Act, or whatever the case is?
I will check on that for you.
Okay, can I get a motion to receive this item, please? Thank you, Kurt. Seconded by Nav. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Did I miss anybody on the screen, by the way? I realized I haven't looked at the Zoom. No? Okay. 4.4 is, 4.3 is the Bronte Harbor lease. Any questions on this matter?
I'll move it, Mr. Chair.
Move. Thank you, Bruce. Moved. Seconded by Nav. Comments, questions? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. 4.4 is the Harm Reduction Program Enhancement Pilot Project and the LOXO Distribution Agreement. Seems like a wonderful initiative. Now,
I'll move it.
Okay. Ingrid, seconded. Any comments or questions?
I have a comment there. Does it generates the requirement for training, I assume, Correct. And the funding for the training comes out of our budget?
So through the chair, we've already trained all of our central lockup members. We have a person that's been trained as a train-the-trainer. So any type of transition within our lockup facility will be able, it's just administration, distribution. So we're not actually giving people naloxone. It's like as you walk out the door from our lockup facility, you will not only get a naloxone kit, but also referrals to appropriate agencies for substance abuse. And it's really an upstream initiative that it's just a no-brainer for the region and for us to partner on.
Thank you.
So our policy is already set and our people have already been trained. We're just waiting for the board's approval to partner with the region.
I know the officers carry naloxone in their cars. Do they carry additional kits that can be handed out when they see circumstances that might warrant it?
We do not carry that stock. Evidence is suggesting that people who are incarcerated and coming out of incarceration are likely at higher risk. This is our best upstream encounter, and by giving it to everybody, it reduces the stigma and allows people to have those respectful interactions with our officers as they walk out with their property and there's a naloxone kit with information.
You know, I don't take anything away from this program. I think it's wonderful, but I'm just wondering if there's, and I just take this opportunity to ask the question, is there an opportunity to get something like this available in quantity in police vehicles? Because, I mean, there's a number of customers that the sworn officers are visiting that might benefit from having a kit dropped off as well, I would imagine.
So we've had discussions with the medical officer of health on this. One of the issues becomes having a bulk supply of this in your car exposed to weather can degrade the product. And again, there's tracking mechanisms and reporting back so we can continue those conversations, but at this juncture, there's other ways of getting these kits through other entities and human service providers in the community.
We're very familiar with one of them, but anything further on this? I see Clark's hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You touched on what I was going to raise is about the difficulty if you're looking at bulk purchases with it being exposed to temperature extremes in the police vehicles. But I guess the other one I would have is, what is the shelf life of it when it's purchased? That, you know, we wouldn't want to see us purchasing a lot then, you know, and having to destroy it if it's not used. Or so I don't know if anyone on staff can answer that.
Chair, I believe the shelf life is 2 years, and then we reissue that to our members so they can carry it on their person, and that's based upon the standard of the product.
Okay, thank you.
I think my understanding is that the potency diminishes with heat. So I think the manufacturer is 36 months, but as its exposure to heat can reduce it dramatically, which is apropos to what we just talked about, which I hadn't thought about before in the cars, because I would really heat up in a trunk. Chief?
It was just something that Clark had said. There is no cost to us we're not purchasing this naloxone. We're actually helping the health department with the distribution of it. And we would look at the further distribution as an option. I'm leery of adding anything else to our frontline officers, but
I didn't thought of the degradation of the product in the vehicle. That's a very good point. Anything further on this matter? I don't see any. Can I get a motion to approve? Is this approval or is this recommendation? It's an approval. Okay. Kurt moving, seconded by Clark. Thank you very much. All in favor? Carried. Sounds like a great initiative. Moving on to our mid-year performance follow-up report. This is a follow-up to the statistics that were presented at the last board meeting. Who's going to give us a high-level summary of this, and then I'll go to questions.
well, we had, at one point, we had taken some of these statistics out of the annual report. There might have been a bit of a misunderstanding with the resolution by the board, so this is sort of bringing the information back with a little more detail and explanation in the 3 or 4 particular areas. Keith Moore is here, who is the author of this report from a statistical point of view, and we have some of our experts in the field here as well if there's specific questions.
Anything else from the deputies? No? Okay. We'll start with Kurt.
I missed the last meeting, the public portion of the meeting. I appreciate the information. I think it's very helpful for us to understand what's happening. And, you know, I admit that when I read the material before the meeting, I found, you know, there was quite a sharp increase, but then when you put context around it, in terms of pre-COVID and post-COVID, it mitigates, you know, against what looked like a significant increase. However, having said that, there is nonetheless a net increase above, I guess, population. My interest really lies in the area of violent crime. And I have a sense, but not supported by statistics, that there has been an increase in violent crime. And what I mean by that is violent vehicle takeovers, perhaps murder. And I would include in that, although it's not always violent, but I think it has a traumatic impact, and that would be hate crime. And so I'd be interested in more comments around the violent crime area. And I would keep an eye on it, you know, as a board member going forward.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. I think it sets up some of our people to make some comments about it. I do believe violent crime is up. I'm not surprised that it's statistically shown to be that way. We've had, I wouldn't say a rash up, but certainly a fairly significant number of violent vehicle carjackings. In fact, someone just reminded us the other day that the murder of the officer in Teal and then the two murders in Milton and the two other shootings, and at the end of all of that was right in the middle of it was a carjacking where a person was shot in the parking lot of the Peel Tim Hortons before the vehicle came here. So we have had a number of carjackings, certainly. We've had a number of robberies where firearms are probably present more than where they used to be. People would indicate they had a firearm. Now they're a little more brazen to show them. I believe, and I've said this before, I think a lot of those particular crimes and the carjackings are people street gang related or not, criminals coming from the east of us, either immediately east or second city to the east. So I think we have a lot of violent crime that's coming to us, which we shouldn't be surprised with the proliferation of street gangs and the violence of some of the young people involved, not just street gangs, but also in crime. And some of those vehicle thefts and carjacking, some of them are random and some of them are also being committed for organized crime purposes where those vehicles are then being shipped over. So people are being paid specifically to steal a certain type of vehicle, gunpoint or not, and then the vehicle is turned over to people that are cashing in and making them.
Just in relation to, you've heard me say it before, but in relation to a lot of our shootings and our most recent homicides, they're all organized crime related. The region is obviously not immune. Almost all the last homicides we've had have all had an organized crime element to them, either where the victim was linked or the parties that were seeking are linked. So 100% that we're seeing that as more of a proliferation than we've ever seen before, which is why we're dedicating a lot of our time to our gang strategy, organized crime groups, the enforcement that we're doing. And then the proactive strategies that we're working on, why we're dedicating 2 members of the organization to the provincial gang strategy. And Inspector Costantini, who's in charge of our organized crime and intelligence, has also been working on our internal gang strategy because we recognize that this is not going away and it's a provincial issue and we've got to be on top of it. So 100% we're seeing that more.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the additional information. I think it's important for us to understand the risks that you're facing in the violent crime area, because as a body, we need to make sure that you have the resources that you need to confront those risks. I think if you don't understand it, it's hard to satisfy that demand. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? So My comment is probably more of a request. I mean, I know that the media are quite interested in the story. They were, many of the local newspapers reported on this story when we had the initial presentation at last board meeting. I'm just wondering, Chief, if you could take this opportunity maybe to speak to the overall assessment of, in your mind, of this, and it should Halton residents worry about this uptick in crime that that has occurred. Because I think that's what the stories were. And that's what the stories read like, that there was an uptick in crime in our community, and I certainly heard on doorsteps in the last this last exercise that we went through in the election. What's your view on the circumstances? Should Halton residents be worried?
Well, I think Halton residents have a responsibility in all of this as well. And I would say citizens in Halton and everywhere with the trends that we're seeing should be concerned. Worried might be a little stronger word. All of our citizens should be concerned about the increase in crime. A lot of crime is targeted and is not random. So in those instances, I would suggest most of our law-abiding citizens are not at risk unless they're sort of a bystander victim of an incident, such as the carjacking victim in Peel. That person had nothing to do with the rest of those crimes that were going on. The carjacking side, largely Range Rovers, Land Rovers. Sometimes there's a bit of a faked accident before that. People should be aware of that sort of modus of operation that the criminals are using to get the vehicle to stop. Don't stop if you think that the situation is potentially a risk. But again, those are specific vehicles that often these criminals are going after. Robberies of pharmacies. I think the pharmacies, as pharmacy owners, can help to do some target hardening of their premises. Whatever that is, and the appearance of their facilities, the presence of more video cameras, whatever you can do to deter people from coming to your store. On the vehicle side, you know, many years ago, I think we were pushing through our community consultation groups when I was a constable, the use of, I'm trying to think of the device you put on the steering wheels. You would think that there would be a technological solution to vehicles these days, and I think there would be. But the cynical side, after 40 years of policing, is if a certain type of vehicle is being stolen every day and the insurance companies are paying for it and the company sells a brand new vehicle, it's almost good for business. So I think there should be, I mean, it's harder to sign into my computer than it is to steal a Lexus or a Toyota for some people that are knowledgeable. I think on the hate crime side, one hate crime is too many. We've certainly seen a bit of an increase in hate crime. Often those are the willful damage types of hate crimes, swastikas drawn or painted on fences and houses. We had, I think within the term of this report, some of those hate situations were the theft of pride flags, where there were probably one or two youth that stole 10 or 15 pride flags in the Burlington area, I think. So some of those things are certainly shouldn't be tolerated, shouldn't happen, but they also increase some of our statistics. We had Dr. Perry here, who is sort of a Canadian renowned expert on hate crime, doing a number of interviews with frontline staff and with both deputies and I. She is quite impressed with the way that we manage hate crime investigations here and that we put the right resources for the situation, certainly overseen by Sergeant Ryan Smith and other people in our EDI office as well. But I think she was quite impressed with the way that Halton does things, and also with the degree of community involvement that we have through our diversity forums and through our interactions and the tremendous relationships that the service has, again, because of Sergeant Ryan Smith and Hardy and other people and Inspector Craddock and the whole team, building those relationships over years. But I think we also need our citizens to be even more on the lookout. You know, I think your predecessor and you have now said from time to time that police are just the citizens that are fortunate enough to get paid for what every citizen is responsible for. So we need people to be watching a little more, watching your neighbors' homes. Video cameras are amazing to help unsolve things when people have home cameras or businesses have cameras. And they can be readily available to us to help us solve crimes. But I think they also have to be a little more leery of their own situations. Everyone should be cautious, we know that. I would encourage people to put devices on their vehicles to prevent vehicle thefts. There's an insurance company actually in the area that had offered to distribute sort of a container that people could put their keys into so that the signals can't be stolen from inside the house. They might want to brand that along with us. There's some proactive, preventative types of things that we can do. And then there is a lot, our citizens should also know that there's a lot of work being done by our investigators. When you look at, in particular, some of the auto theft investigations, successful conclusion of auto theft investigations, and we have one of our detective sergeants here today that could speak more on some of those in detail, but the recovery of millions of dollars of stolen vehicles and arrests of people, often firearms connected with those as well. So I think it's a multi-tiered thing where we need our citizens to be cognizant of what's going on. Just because we're saying Halton is the safest large municipality in Canada doesn't mean everyone is safe every day. And it shines a light, and I think Mr. Allen made this point as well, it shines a light on policing staffing and resources and legitimization of police budgets to a degree, where we need to hire for some of these changes, not just population growth, but also changes in quantity of criminal offenses and the sophistication or complications that come along with some of those investigations these days with encrypted phones and all sorts of things that our cyber people are coming across on a daily basis. So yes, I think I would ask our citizens to be a little more heightened awareness, and we'll certainly continue to help to educate them. And these sorts of reports and statistics, most citizens don't see this. There are not many online, I don't think, today listening, but we also have a very newly launched crime map on our system, which the board heard about a month or two ago now, so people can go and educate themselves as well on what's happening over time in their neighborhoods, engage their level of reaction to that.
So it would be, first of all, that was an excellent summary. Thank you very much. Very insightful and helpful for those who are watching, particularly I think the media, who will help carry our message to the community. Is it safe to say that the fact that we like to brag that we are the safest regional community in Canada might actually be doing us a disservice in some ways, that might be putting people into a false sense of security, and that we should be cautious how much we brag about our success and remain vigilant?
You know, it's always nice to say that we're the best or we're the lowest crime, but really we have crime. It's just other cities are worse. So if we start to maybe change the dialogue to, we've had 3 individuals and 2 incidents murdered this year, 2 other people shot. And we certainly have human trafficking, I forgot to a minute ago. So yes, I think that those things are important. And I did want to mention, human trafficking is something like drug trafficking. You don't know what's out there until you start to investigate it and lay the charges. So all of these charges that you're seeing in relation to human trafficking are only because someone has been caught or our investigators have developed relationships with the victims of human trafficking to the point where that they're comfortable or willing to come forward. It's just the tip of the iceberg. So how do we get deeper into the iceberg is the question, and how many people investigating human trafficking is enough or is too much. So we'll continue to look at flexible ways to do that, but I certainly think we need our citizens to know that crime is happening here, and serious crime, organized crime, fentanyl, of course, is all happening here. So how much is too much?
So I do note that some of the areas that you're going to engage the community in public education are things like the town hall, resident association presentations, et cetera. How can the service do more? And is this something the board can assist with? Because as an example, there was without centering out, one sworn officer in the room right now, and I was in a presentation with Ron Wright a couple months back. That was an excellent presentation on hardening your home against car theft. And it was surprising some of the comments that I'd had after it, or even the online chat that happened. They're very simple little techniques that people could deploy in order to keep their vehicle safe. Put your car in the garage and lock it up, being a really simple one, right? And I think for a lot of folks didn't necessarily know this going in. How do we get that message out more? And how can the service be more proactive in getting that information out? Can the board assist in this regard as well?
Well, from the board's perspective, I think the timing's really quite good because we're just about to embark on some business planning, and you'll be doing some, fairly in-depth community consultation types of meetings. The problem with a lot of those, and we see it business plan after business plan or year after year, you get a certain number of counselors in that municipality where we're going to have the consultation meeting and 3 or 4 or 10 citizens. It's really not reflective of that community. It's a snapshot, and then we do, through Keith and others, we'll do surveys and assist the board with all those sorts of things. So it's got to be multifaceted. It's got to be, we need to leverage our TV and radio stations. Our CHCH is, I think, a very good positive partner of ours on the TV side, but not everyone in Oakville watches the Hamilton News. The Oakville Beaver and the Burlington Post, and all those are sort of, I don't want to say a dying breed, but their staff have been cut so much, even in the 10 years I've been back here. And readership is very different. It's forced to be online. So we have to do a lot of the proactive things that we do through our corporate communications and our media relations officers to get messages out through social media, Twitter, Instagram, all the different LinkedIn accounts that we're on. But I think we need to keep pushing that, and we need to do as much education as we can. Some people, there's a real complacency in the Canadian population. I mean, really, we saw it with the voter turnout in the municipal elections. I don't know if it was 20 or 30%, but it's the level of government which touches every one of our citizens almost every day gets that level. It's because people just assume it's going to happen, and it's not their house that got broken into. So until your house gets broken into or your car gets stolen, you don't feel like you're a victim or you're going to be one, and everyone feels like they're sort of immune to that. And I think we need to, it was in the 1980s doing community consultation things as a constable in the east end of Burlington, and people would say, my neighbor's dog's barking and this is happening, and we're like, yeah, and we've done it with the board's consultation. Okay, but you're here from Milton, and 200 houses were broken into last year, and 85 cars were stolen. Oh, okay, do something about that. So we need to educate them so that they can tell us what they want us to prioritize as well. So I think that we have to keep sending that message out over and over and over. And not everyone's on Twitter. So there is no one way for us to reach everybody anymore. We can't send out, the sort of alerts that we do on the phone for major incidents. It's almost where we need people to subscribe to information. Maybe something we can do in the future through technology.
I have one last question. I'll go back to my colleague. Is there a specific game plan set out in terms of how the service is going to execute a comprehensive or cohesive communication strategy around these areas? I know we have a communications department and recently appointed a new director, I believe. Is there a specific plan that could be maybe presented to the board so we have an understanding and maybe have an opportunity to provide some input? Not referring to the public consultation for the upcoming business planning, but in terms of that proactive outreach into the communities that is like the one I mentioned earlier with that Detective Wright was part of. Is there a comprehensive plan on how we can get that message out? other than just reacting to opportunities.
Yeah, I think what I would suggest for the board is to have, Inspector Laframboise with Julie Rolfe on the corporate communications team to do a bit of a presentation on all the different things that they do. Just even so you know the channels that they're reaching out to people on. And the sort of, I think our Twitter account is around 100,000 followers right now for the Halton Police. I'm about 18 or something, so that's not 700,000, but it's got a fair reach. But a lot of those people are in Toronto or Kingston, so it's a little bit misleading. But I think an overview of what we are doing would be helpful for the board.
I think it would be, especially in light of these statistics and your very appropriate admonishment to the community of how they need to participate. I think it'd be good to understand more about the communications aspect of the services business. So let's move to our questions. First up is Don. I think I've got a lot of hands now, so I'll go to Don first, then Clark, then Trevor.
Thank you, Chair. We're all talking the same thing here. Mine is a little more specific about requesting a monthly YouTube interview, not only with the chief and the deputies, which is good to get known in your community, but the various other aspects and personnel of the force. And I think if we build it, they will come. Literally once a month. I don't want to add too much to the work, a 15-minute segment or something. Have you given any thought to that?
Yeah, no, certainly. Thank you for the question. We have. We've got a number of podcasts that we're involved with. In fact, our recruiters, our sergeant from recruiting and a couple of relatively new officers are going to do a podcast with a group called Sentinel. I think the board saw one that I did with them a year or so ago. So we'll take every advantage of that sort of thing. We are actually doing and investing in, and Raj can speak to a specific podcast plan that we are going to try in the near future.
Great.
To the chair, we've partnered with a company out of Toronto to move into a different space. Social media platforms don't reach everybody. We want to reach people that want to understand the complexities of policing. And so we've gone through a fairly robust process of identifying topics. We are filming in mid-November. And then this is like collateral that we will have as an organization to launch and relaunch at different times throughout the year, and then build upon that. And depending on our success and traction that we'll get from that, we may choose to go down that stream and continue to partner with this company or do our own thing on a YouTube kind of channel. But the reality is you can do social media posts and only certain people read that. We need to engage our community in different ways, and that's what we're exploring through our corporate communications. We're very excited about it and looking forward to sharing the outputs of those recordings in mid-November.
Great. Thanks, Deputy.
Clark,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the last question you asked the chief kind of led into what I was going to raise on how do we communicate. Especially gets even harder when you get north of the 401 where there's no dedicated radio station. The Metroland papers, which were always our go-to, only go to 25% of the population, and only 15 of them even get things above the ad. So it's a difficult one, Chief, but I think it's one we have to keep trying different avenues until we can see how the results fare out, whether it's even, the banner ads on social media and some of these other ones as well, because as we saw in the election campaign, I think every place would have been happy if they would have had a 30% turnout, because most were dramatically under that as well. So it's one I think, we have to keep trying the different avenues, trying to get the message out. And I commend you for looking at all these different ways we can do that. That's it, for me, Mr. Chair.
I dare say that the average Oakville, Halton, Burlington resident probably know more about what's happening with the Toronto Police Service than they do with our own police service, based on the way the media works in our community. So I echo those concerns. It's not just north of the 401; it's also south of the 401. We have a real challenge getting messaging out across the board on all our services. Next up is Kurt.
I just want to make a comment, and then I have a question, if I may, Mr. Chair. I was very pleased to see the media attention that was given to the last meeting. I thought that was very useful. And then I know that people paid attention to it. I paid attention to it, and I saw it. I think something that this board can think about, though, and it's an item that's in a later agenda, is our own communication post-meetings. Now for a question, and it's my last one, Chief, on this subject. The intimate partner calls for service, there was quite a spike in those during COVID. Is that starting to diminish at all that you've noticed, or is it still on the uptrend?
It's something I actually monitor personally myself, like weekly, and it's actually down. Okay. It's going down. But that's an excellent example of something that we have to, as a community, work on, even though that awareness piece right there, the very fact that you had to ask that question, there's definitely some awareness and some education that we're working on with our other community groups, because you'll see that even if other community groups that we work with are trying to do their own media, trying to bring awareness, and I pay attention to it quite closely, and you'll see that they're not getting a lot of uptake themselves. So that's something that through the CSWB plan that we're actually working on, and I think you'll see probably me come back to this group in the near future and ask for a little bit of assistance in pushing some of the education and some help in bringing this awareness from the board and others.
Yeah, but just to add to that, we also know, I mean, a lot of intimate partner violence is never reported, or it's reported after 7 or 8 incidents. So again, our citizens and our neighbors and workmates of people are going to make some observations that sometimes people are prone to turn a blind eye to. And people should be a little more cognizant of this potentially going on. And bring things forward if they think it's enough of a concern.
Kurt?
Can I make a motion now to accept? Is that what we're doing?
I think that would be perfectly appropriate, which is what I was about to ask.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Moved and seconded by? Somebody, thank you, Ingrid, thank you very much. Before we take the vote, I want to thank the team for this report and particularly for your comments, Chief. They were very helpful. I would, by virtue of this conversation, ask that the media that are watching help us in spreading this word across the community. We didn't mean to diminish your role. Your role is very important. The challenge is getting eyes on these various forms of media so that we can get this message out through those channels. I would ask that Chief, your staff work with the CGO and the Secretary to get a report on the agenda in the near future to do a deeper dive into the communications pieces on this thing. We're obviously very interested, I won't say we're alarmed, but certainly there's a heightened awareness of I don't want to sound like it's a competition, but the danger to our status as being the most safe community, and we shouldn't take that for granted, and we certainly shouldn't accept that as being a permission to be lax. Not the service, but the community, in expecting that will remain constant forever. So let's learn more about the communications, and perhaps the board can provide some feedback as well from a community and citizen perspective. So with that, I'll take the vote. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, next up is the board team performance evaluation. This is Fritz. Anything you want to comment on? It's pretty self-explanatory, I believe.
Yes, the board went through this last meeting in the board-only session, and the board's feedback has been incorporated. Essentially, the evaluation of the board itself as a team looks at 2 sets of criteria. One is the board fulfilled its role, and the other is how it adhered to its own governance methodology. And the intent is that each board member scores the board as a whole, and then the aggregate totals are collated, and the board holds a debrief each January.
Thanks, Fred. So, I mean, in bottom line for the citizens that are watching this, because this was largely done outside of our public session, it's a way it's all part of our governance program, our governance review and revitalization to hold ourselves accountable as a board, but also to each other in terms of our performance as a board to make sure that we're fulfilling our obligations and responsibilities and, to the citizens and to each other. So this is another step in that evolution that we have been undertaking for the last 16 months now, I guess it is.
About that.
Yeah.
And it is also in the absence of any provincial.
Yes, that's right.
Evaluation system.
Yes, and we're speaking to you, Solicitor General's office. Sitting right over there. With that, I'll ask, does anybody have any further questions or comments on this now?
Thank you. I just have one additional question around the process, Fred. I think at the end of our process, the last step is the board should discuss the results of the January meeting, but I think I want to see some kind of an action plan devised for ourselves, and that would be something that you might want to add.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. Do that as a friendly amendment.
Yes.
Good.
I'll figure out some wording.
Yeah.
Essentially, so it's not left hanging at the end is discussion. The end is actually corrective action where required.
If we could quickly come up with some wording and maybe just come back to that, so that we don't have to bring this back and put it on a future agenda. Is there a way we can, because we already...
Number 4 in the process notes, the board shall discuss the results of the January board-only meeting, comma.
Action for improvement, maybe worth something.
And develop an action plan as required.
Right. Will that work for you?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Secretary, have you noted that? Thank you. Okay, great. And we don't have to bring it back again. It's good to get these things dealt with.
I'm happy to move it.
Thank you, Kurt. Seconded by? Seconded by Nab. Thank you very much.
Now you're not looking at me.
I'm sorry? I know, I'm trying to share the wealth of moving and seconding, because this has been the Kurt and Nab show so far, so, I'm angry. Any further comments or questions? All in favor? All in favor? Thank you. That's carried. Well done, everybody. We're making serious progress on this governance front. I'm very happy with that. Yet another policy and procedure approved. We have operational verbal updates today in public sector. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, there's also the board member evaluation next time on the agenda.
I apologize. Okay, so in the same vein, we have the board member evaluation up next. Any comments or questions on that?
I'll just say that, if I may, Chair, that this one, again, is in the absence of a provincial framework. Mr. Tilley, feel free to borrow any of these materials.
He is the messenger here.
So it's the evaluations along 3 components as agreed to by the board at the last meeting. The first is fulfillment of the board obligations in accordance with policy TO4, board member obligations. The second one is application of the board governance principles as outlined in governance policy 3, governance methodology. And the third one is a demonstration of police board member competencies, which are similar to OAPSB's proposal of spring 2021, which is, to my understanding, the Solicitor General's staff has not responded to yet. But that framework was based on the Institute of Corporate Directors competency profile for corporate directors. So essentially, it's all I would say, leading edge police board member competencies and sort of best measuring sticks we have.
Made in Halton?
Made in Halton.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question again around the process.
Sure.
So we will discuss the results, but if there's any serious deficiencies, is there a process step?
Should we just add the same words from the last proposal?
I would just say plans would be plural in this case, and develop action plans as required.
Right, because it's as board members.
7 members currently.
Graham, do you have that noted? Okay. Thank you. So for the public, this is another of our our governance program initiatives that I spoke of earlier. Once again, this is the previous one was talking about the board corporately. This is individually. It's all part of increasing the professionalism, competencies, and performance of our board here at the Halton Police Board. Members of the board, can I get a motion to approve it as amended, please? Thank you, Ingrid. Thank you, Clark. Further questions, comments? All in favor? That's carried. Okay, I'm sorry for the false start. Operational verbal updates.
Through the chair, you may have seen on social media a recent post regarding our commitment to impaired driving and road safety. Two of our officers received the Mothers Against Drunk Driving annual award. Constable Oliver Preprack and Dave Rivers received that award for their tremendous commitment to road safety and their tenacity when it comes to hunting down impaired drivers. A total of 36 arrests just between the two of them. So very proud of their initiatives. You might have seen that on social media, but just to bring it to your attention again.
Thank you. Exciting, and make sure you take back the board's congratulations. I think many of us already commented on the Twitter post, but it's great to highlight it more. Thank you. Further comments or questions? Or sorry, further verbal updates?
I don't believe so. Other than, unfortunately, we will have a couple of our members attending another police funeral in Burnaby, BC, for the RCMP officer who was recently murdered there. So we will be sending out two members, and the Police Association will be sending out two as well to represent Halton there. So another sad day for police.
Okay, moving on, public information action registry. You have your action registry, it's been circulated. Mr. CGO, any...
Want to white up the last item there, will be coming forward in a few weeks at the November meeting. And that's an updated healthy workplace policy. I'm going to circle back with Tracy on that. And the rest of them are in the new year. Public action registry.
Great, thank you. Questions? And then can I get a motion? Oh, sorry, go ahead now.
Sorry, I wasn't here at the last the meeting, but was there a policy on harassment that we reviewed, or?
I'll have to follow up on that on the break. I'm not exactly sure what you're asking. Did we review a harassment policy? No. Last month, I don't believe so. It's not in the minutes.
I think you're, if I can help, essentially talking about what Inspector Laframboise is too big to working on. That's coming up in November.
Okay.
So I think it might be on the confidential side.
Yeah, okay. That's where it was.
So is that a new policy, or is that an existing policy that needs amendment?
No, I could probably go into it a little bit more in camera, just
sure.
A while.
A motion to receive the action registry, please. Thank you, Clark. Thank you, Kurt. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. You've all had your public correspondence circulated in Dillatrust. Are there any requests to bring it forward today, or are you satisfied to approve the receipt of the correspondence? Ingrid nodded her head, so I'm going to take that as a motion. Is there, Clark?
I just had an item of new business. I was just getting ready for you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the pre-planning. Is there a seconder to that? The receipt? Thank you, Kurt. All in favor? Correspondence is approved. Okay, new business. Mr. Clark Somerville.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to represent the board last weekend at the Police Retirees Luncheon. That was a tremendous event, and hearing the bios of the retiring officers, both sworn and civilian, was really great to hear the work that they had done. And I know I was there with both Mr. Allen and Mr. Foster, and I think I could speak for all three of us saying how much we enjoyed it and how great it was to see that. And I think it was, and the chief might correct me, it was 2,700 years of policing, I think it was, that we were honoring that day. So it was a tremendous event, and thank you again, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity.
Yeah, no, that number is correct. I know we were looking at it. We, through attrition retirement, lose about 800 years of police service every year. Because of COVID, this was sort of catching up the last 3 years all at once. So we have sort of 24 to 28 people retire each year. Certainly not all of them are able to be there at this event, but a significant number were. So we were able to present plaques and different things on behalf of the board and the service. But yeah, 2,700, it would have been 2,800 if another inspector retired, but we just joke about those things. So it was a really, really well attended event and very much appreciated.
On my part, I want to thank you, Clark, for being our spokesman for the board. I would love to have attended. I've only had the pleasure of attending once prior to COVID, when I was, I think I was actually just attending on behalf of the past chair, but I also enjoyed that one very much and learned a lot about these tremendous folks that retired. And I want to thank you, Clark, for doing that for the board. I was detained by the less than 24 hours leading to the election so I could keep my job. So I sort of had to focus on that for the day, but I do congratulate all of the retirees on behalf of the board, and I hope to be there next time. Anything further under new business? I do not see anything, so members of the board, it's time to move into closed session. I'll need a motion to go into camera at this time. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Clark. It's not a comment or question thing. All in favor? And that's carried. We are going to move into a session closed to the public. Members of the public who are watching and members of the media, thank you for your attention and interest today watching on our live streaming service. We hope that you found this enlightening. And as always, we invite you to attend each and every board meeting and as well feedback through our communications channels if you have any questions or comments. We certainly do want to hear from you about how we can better represent you, but also we want to be able to convey we want to be able to convey what we're doing as a board and understand the governance role that we play over the Halton Police Service. So with that, this meeting is recessed for, what time is it now? 10:02. I will recess the meeting until 10:15 and we'll reconvene in closed session. Thank you, everybody.